Are you going to Australia on a working holiday visa? Well, if you're watching this video, you're off to a very good start. I lived in Australia for 2 years and I can honestly say with my hand on my heart, everything we cover in today's video is super simple stuff that anybody can do. So, starting off, everything you need before coming to Australia. We're starting off with the most obvious one, the visa. The visa you'll be coming to Australia on is a working holiday visa. This visa lasts for 12 months and gives you full working rights in Australia. And once your visa is granted, you have 12 months to arrive in Australia from the day your visa is granted. And then once you've arrived, your 12 months on your visa officially starts then. Now, the visa currently at the moment costs 635 Australian dollars at this time. Applying for the visa, you'll just go to the Australian immigration website. I'll have that linked below. And it's basically just a couple of screening questions and some personal details. Now, there are some requirements for the visa. The 18 to 35, that's obviously non-negotiable. The $5,000 in a clear criminal record is a little bit of a grey area. It's only proof of $5,000. They're never going to ask for you to prove it again. You could get someone to send you $5,000, get the screenshot or the PDF capture of the bank statement, put that in with your visa application, and then that's done. You can send them the money straight back. I don't recommend it. Obviously, $5,000 is a good amount to start off with in Australia, but if you're desperate to get out of the UK, that is an option. The clear criminal record, obviously, I'm a super good boy. I've never been convicted, so when I applied for my visa, it got approved straight away. Because I had a friend who had been convicted for drink driving, and when he applied for his visa, it did get approved. I just think it took a little bit longer. If it's a misdemeanor, like drink driving, for example, I think you're going to be okay, but obviously the more harsh stuff like murder and gang-related stuff, that would probably decline your visa. Now, the waiting times for your visa, they do actually have it displayed on their website, but honestly, I think it's very misleading. For waiting times, I think it just depends how many people are applying and how simple your visa application is. If you've been done for drink driving or you have any convictions, you've got to check that through. Or if you've been to any more unusual countries like Africa where you've had to have injections, then obviously they've got to scan through your record to make sure you're not going to be a problem. Now, moving on to the international bank account. This is going to be the cheapest and best way to transfer your native currency into Australian dollars. You can use Monzo, Revolut, Wise. I can only sing the praises for Wise. Super cheap rates, never had an issue with the app, and there's more currencies on Wise, and you can hold more currencies on Wise than any of the others. That's why I personally prefer to pick them. Now, moving on to vaccines. For the majority of people, I don't think you need to bother getting any vaccines. For the 2 years I spent in Australia, I wasn't sick once. However, if you're someone who gets sick very frequently in the UK, I can't guarantee you're going to be better off or worse in Australia. So if you get ill quite frequently, I would definitely get vaccines. But if you're like me, you're never poorly, you're never sick, it's just going to be a waste of money. Now, moving on to travel insurance. It is your responsibility to look after your health. So I highly recommend getting some form of insurance. And you don't really need to go too crazy with it. You only need one with crazy high hospital bills, something like $5 million or $10 million. And then anything else that's going to benefit you. If you're coming to Australia with $20,000 worth of gadgets, maybe you want to get them insured, but as a baseline minimum, you need your hospital expenses covered. You can afford to replace a new camera, you cannot afford to replace one of your kidneys. Your flight into Australia, the 4 main international airports are as follows. To get the best out of your working holiday visa, you're going to want to start off in either Sydney or Melbourne, mainly because these are the 2 major cities that most people are able to fly to, so you're going to meet a lot of people who are in the same position as you. They've flown to the other side of the world, they don't know anyone, and they're just here to explore and make friends. Because on day 1, when you first get to Australia, you're going to be excited, you're going to be nervous, you're going to be worried that you're so far away from home. But once you realize you're not alone and everyone here is in the same boat as you, it's going to be so much easier to come out of your shell and you'll be so much more confident you made the right decision coming to Australia. Now, if I had to pick between Sydney or Melbourne, I think the majority of people will be better off starting in Sydney. Both places are major cities, but Sydney's got beautiful beaches and pool parties, so it's kind of like a fucking holiday destination. It's very hard to have a bad time in Sydney, especially when you first get there. Whereas Melbourne, it doesn't have beautiful beaches and you kind of need to go the right places in Melbourne. If you end up in some fucking goth bar on a random Wednesday night, unless that's your sort of thing, you're not going to have a good time. So I wouldn't start off in Perth, as everything is super spread out and you need to have a car, which you're probably not going to do within your first 2 weeks of being in Australia. Brisbane, nothing really interesting about Brisbane. It's just like any other city, so it's probably not best to start off your trip there. So now booking your accommodation. I would highly recommend booking your accommodation before you come to Australia, and I would book between 7 to 10 days. I think that's a good amount of time to get settled and sorted and figure out all the things you need to do. Obviously, it's super easy to extend your stay, but it isn't like how it is in Southeast Asia where they keep your bed reserved. You need to be booked on a day they have a bed available, so make sure you keep on top of that. So when booking your accommodation, I would highly recommend downloading Hostel World and booking it through there, as you can just search the area that you're staying and all the hostels in the area will come up. It has your ratings, reviews and pictures, so you can get a proper inside look of what the hostel is going to be like before you go there. Most of the accommodation on Hostel World has a 24-hour cancellation policy, so if your plans are forever changing or you don't have anything set in stone, it's perfect just to cancel and rebook somewhere else. If it's your first time moving away from home and your first time staying in a hostel, I would highly recommend either booking a party hostel, a hostel with a bar, or a hostel with activities, because they're going to have a bit more of a social going on. It'll be much easier to meet friends, and once you've got your group of friends and you're more familiar with the area, you can just move to a more chilled out and more relaxed hostel that's a bit more comfortable to live in. Now finally, bring in loose cash to Australia. I would recommend bringing maybe 200 Australian dollars. I think that's a good amount, just have as a safety buffer in case anything goes wrong. And that's everything you need to sort before coming to Australia. Now moving on to our first day duties. All the things you're going to want to sort as soon as possible when you get to Australia. So starting off with a tax file number. Your tax file number is your own unique number that your employee needs to pay you and tax you properly. You can do this by applying online. I'll leave the description below, but it can take up to 4 weeks to come. So that's why I recommend doing it as soon as possible. Unfortunately, you don't receive an email, you receive your tax file number in the post. So obviously, if it's going to take up to 4 weeks to come, you're going to have to put down an address that you can either access in 4 weeks or you can get someone else to access in 4 weeks. And you can also put down a post office for your address and have them read it for you. Now, I never did that and I don't know anyone who did that, so I can't talk or say how easy or how difficult it is. You can actually work without having your tax file number. The first 4 weeks you work at a company, you'll be taxed at the normal amount. However, if you don't have your tax file number after those 4 weeks, you'll be paying 50% tax. So obviously it's something you want to get sorted straight away. So now moving on to the SIM card. Phone service providers care more about new customers than any other customers they have. So you'll be able to get such a good deal on your phone while you're in Australia. And lots of packages they offer, you can cancel whenever. So even if you're in Australia for 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, you can cancel it whenever and you've got yourself a good deal. I got a deal with Optus, very good provider, for $40 a month, unlimited calls, unlimited tech, unlimited internet. £20 a month for all that. That is by far cheaper than doing a pay-as-you-go still. I had friends that used cheaper and less known brands and they couldn't get service in the most civilized city type areas. I would definitely either use Optus or Telstra and just see which one you can get a better deal with. Moving on to your Australian bank account. Obviously, you're going to need to set up an Australian bank account as soon as possible because when you get your first job, your employer needs a way to pay you. Setting up your bank account, you just go to the bank with your passport and you'll fill out all the information. You'll probably get your card between 3 and 7 days and then you're set. The main 2 banks in Australia are Commonwealth and Westpac. I can personally say Westpac is a good bank to pick, but I don't think it'll matter too much if you use Commonwealth. So now moving on to your superannuation. Your superannuation is basically a pension. Every hour you work, your employer will make a contribution to it. When you leave Australia, you can actually claim that money back. I recommend setting up your own superannuation because if you don't, your employer will set one up for you. And obviously, if you work at 6 different companies in your time within Australia, when it comes to claiming that money back, it's going to be very difficult because you're going to have to get the information from 6 separate accounts and then put that forward to the Australian tax office. And obviously, it'll be taxed at like 60% because you're withdrawing the money early. At the end of the day, it's free money, so you may as well get on board with it. Now moving on to Medicare. This is some form of health insurance, I would say. If you've got a Medicare card, you'll be able to get some treatments on the hospital for free, or it'll be at a discounted price. You can either fill in an application online or go to a centre. I would highly recommend going to a centre. I filled out mine twice. I waited 6 months, didn't receive anything. Waited another 3 months, I didn't receive anything. But I had friends that needed the Medicare card and they just went to a Medicare centre or a Centrelink centre, filled out their information and they got it within 2 weeks. So if you're looking to get that Medicare card sorted, I would highly recommend just going to a centre rather than doing it online. Now moving on to making friends. I know it can be very daunting moving to a new place. You don't know anyone. You've got no idea what's going to happen. But I'm telling you now, everyone here is in the same position as you. They all come to the other side of the world. They don't know anyone. They're just here to explore and have a good time. So you're more than likely going to bond just over that shared experience alone. And for any timid souls who are quite introverted and worry about making friends, I had friends who spoke little to no English. So if they can make friends with people without even communicate, you're going to be fine. And if you're unfortunate enough to make bad friends, like you don't like the people in the hostel, that's okay. All the major tourist cities will have Instagram groups, they'll have activities. If you just search into Instagram, the name of the city that you're in, there'll more than likely be some sort of group where they have activities running weekly or daily that you can take part in to make friends. Now, lots of people coming to Australia don't know if they should work first or travel first. I personally think traveling first is by far the best option. You're going to see all the cool places, make all these great friends, and expose yourself to more ideas so you'll get a much better understanding of where you want to start working and the kind of jobs you want to do. Whereas if you start working straight away, your options are very limited. I would always say to travel first, but I understand some people, they don't have the funds to just get traveling straight away. If you are one of these people who want to work first, I would highly recommend starting your trip off in Brisbane or getting to Brisbane as soon as possible. Brisbane is a large city, so there is so many jobs available and it's not that expensive to live there. Obviously, Sydney is much more beautiful, it's much more pretty, and there is more jobs, but it's like twice the price to live there. I know that could be a little bit stressful if you're trying to find work, so that's exactly why I would start off in Brisbane. If you're wanting to travel first, the most common thing people do is the East Coast, and people either start in Melbourne or Sydney and go up all the way to Cairns, or they start in Cairns and go all the way down to either Sydney or Melbourne. Now, it doesn't really matter which way you do it. I would just speak to as many people as you can and find out what they're doing, because sometimes people fly to Cairns and then do it down, and then obviously sometimes people go up, and you're going to want to be going the way most people are going. You'll keep meeting people in the same places and you'll just be able to have a much better time. Now, depending on how many activities you do, how long you travel for, and how careful you are with your money, it's going to cost between 5,000 Australian dollars to 10,000 Australian dollars. You can make your trip really short to make it super cheap, or you can splash out and travel absolutely everywhere. But it's entirely up to you how much you spend, and you just need to budget and plan for it. So if you were like me, coming to Australia with no idea how you're even going to do your East Coast trip, that's completely fine. There's travel companies like Happy Travel and Trvl that give you all the information you need. They'll tell you all the places to go and all the activities that are worth doing, and they can even book your buses, your accommodation, and your activities for you. You're only going to save about $50 throughout your entire trip by booking it yourself. So I would highly recommend just booking it through them, because they'll get everything sorted for you and you'll be on your way. They also sometimes get better deals than you can get, because they can promise that they'll bring in so many customers. So in some activities, you'll actually save money booking it through the travel companies. So now moving on to suitcase or backpack. I personally prefer a backpack. Obviously, it's much easier to get around up, stairs and rough terrain with a backpack. I would just say if you're bringing shitloads of stuff, you may as well just bring a suitcase. You can't be walking around Australia with a 120 litre backpack on your back and a 45 litre on your front. It's too much stuff, it's too heavy, and you'll end up getting taxis everywhere. I would say as a rule, if you can fit all your stuff into 2 reasonably sized bags, I would bring a backpack. If you've got silly amounts of stuff, I would bring a suitcase and a small bag. Now, covering what you need to bring to Australia. You're all adults, I don't need to tell you to bring a toothbrush, underpants. You all know a rough idea what to bring, but this list is just things you might not expect. The southern half of the country gets super duper cold, so you're going to want to have a hoodie and some warm trousers. The northern half of the country has a tropical climate, so you have a dry season where it never rains and a wet season where it's 50-50 of really nice sunshine and torrential rain. So you're going to want to bring at least one waterproof. Sun is very intense here in Australia, so you're going to want to have a hat with some sort of brim, because it just means you don't need to put sun cream on your neck and face every time you leave the house. And you're going to want to get a universal plug adapter. If you ever go to Asia on holiday or travel there once your visa expires, you don't need to get the individual adapter there. You can just use this one thing and it plugs straight in. So that is it for today's video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If there is some questions you have and you feel like you need to know something, drop them in the comments below and I will answer them as best as I can. Thanks again for watching, guys. Peace.